How's it going, everyone? Welcome to another video. Today we're gonna make mini chocolate babka buns. Similar to my lemon challah, these are made with a 4-strand braid, which is super easy to do, but look at the result, they look perfect. And if you're not a fan of chocolate, fill them with something else, perhaps some jam, that's up to you. But check out this cross section. Soft and fluffy dough, layered with delicious filling. You can't go wrong with a recipe like this. Did I mention that they're super easy to make? Because they are. So let's get to it and see what we need. For the dough, we'll need some all-purpose flour, milk, yeast, salt, soft brown sugar and a bit of butter. We'll need some more soft brown sugar and a bit of water for glazing the buns after they're baked. And for the filling, I got some soft brown sugar, butter, cocoa powder and cinnamon. Yeah, we're going all out with the soft brown sugar in this one. It just provides such a rich flavor and works so well with the cocoa. Now mix the filling ingredients until they're nice and smooth. You should end up with a spreadable paste like this. Now let's see what equipment we need. We'll need a bowl, scales, a dough scraper, temperature probe, a brush, a spatula for spreading the filling, something to cut the dough with, I'm using this pizza wheel but you can use a knife, and some molds for baking. You can certainly use a muffin tin for this. And you'll definitely need a rolling pin. So now we can start making our dough. I'm using cold milk because it's the middle of summer and kneading dough by hand will really warm it up. As I always say, I'd rather have my dough too cool after mixing, then I can mix it further to bring the temperature up instead of having it too warm, because then there's not much you can do. So in a large bowl, combine the milk, yeast, salt and the sugar. Mix everything well to dissolve any large salt and sugar crystals and to hydrate the yeast. Now you can add the butter and the flour, then grab your scraper and start mixing this to a dough. You want to mix it in a bowl until there's no more dry flour left, to avoid making a mess on your table, and if the scraper's not doing the job, continue on by hand. Once everything's nicely mixed, pop your dough out on the table and we can start kneading it. This is a low hydration dough, so it's very easy to knead it, so I'm going to use my regular kneading method. What I like to do is press down and forwards with the heel of my right hand, then using the fingers of my left hand I fold the piece of dough under the heel of my right hand, then turn it and repeat. And once you've done this a few times, the motion will become fluent. It'll be like second nature. And if you are a subscriber, you've probably heard me say this line about 100 times already. Anyway, about 5 minutes later, once your dough is nice and smooth, pop it in the bowl and take its temperature. Around 25 to 26 degrees Celsius is just about right for this. The sugar in the dough will affect fermentation. So depending on the temperature of your kitchen, you want to leave this to ferment for an hour to an hour and a half. And after the first proof, we need to give it a fold. As you can see, it started puffing up already. In this case, folding will help us with degassing the dough, it'll help with equalizing the temperature, and will also get it towards its final shape. So place your dough out on the table smooth side down, flatten it out, then fold the top third down and the bottom third up, and then cross the two sides over in the middle. So we ended up with extra layers in the dough, and it's kind of square already, because we need to roll it out to that shape later on. Now back in the bowl it goes for another hour to an hour and a half, and now it should really start puffing up. It has definitely doubled in size since we began. If your dough hasn't risen this much, just leave it for longer. But if it's rising rapidly, cut the fermentation time down. But this one's just about right, so I'm going to continue on by rolling it out. Dust the dough on the table generously with flour. This time you can use quite a lot, because as we roll it, the dough will absorb quite a lot of the flour. What I always like to do before rolling is pressing the dough out by hand. That way you can get it into a general shape before you start attacking it with a rolling pin. It's very easy to distort a dough ball, make it a weird shape, if you start rolling it right from the get-go. So always press it out and then continue on with the rolling pin. And we want to roll this to a massive rectangle. It's about the length of my forearm, from my fingertips to my elbow. So that could be a good measurement to go by. And after you have finished with the rolling pin, you can tidy it up by hand, make it nice and square. Lastly, brush off any excess flour from the surface. Now we can spread on the filling. The way I like to do this is to dab it on all over the dough, and only then spread it out. And just as we're rolling, take your time, there's no rush. Spread it out nice and evenly, but do leave about an inch of dough at the very top. We'll use that for sealing. So after spreading, correct the dough again, make it nice and straight, because now we're going to fold it. But before we do so, brush the top edge with a little bit of water. Now visually divide the dough into thirds horizontally. Then fold the bottom third up. Again, there's no rush, don't throw the dough over, just fold it gently, make sure it's nice and straight. Then pat it down so there's no air inside, straighten it out. Now take the top third and fold it down. And we have a nice rectangle of dough with 3 layers. But don't worry if your one's a bit wonky, we'll trim the edges off anyway. Before we start trimming it up and cutting it up, dust the dough with flour, also dust the table, to prevent any stickage. Now I'm gonna make 6 buns out of this, but you could actually turn this into a whole loaf. When it comes to the fillings that you use, make sure they're not too runny. A soft filling really makes it difficult to work with this dough. I'm using the rolling pin very lightly here, do not press hard. In fact, you don't have to use it at all. I just wanted to flatten the dough out a bit, but it won't make much of a difference in the end product. Okay, so let's start slicing it up. Grab your pizza wheel or a knife. If you're using a knife, don't mess up your table. First things first, trim the edges. And to not waste the end pieces, you can cut them up and place them in the bottom of your muffin tins, before placing the buns on top. And you know what they say, measure 6 times, cut once. So visually divide this into 6 pieces and start cutting them up. If your muffin tins are smaller, you can divide this into more. But regardless of how many you are making, the next step is to divide each into 4 strips, since this is a 4-strand braid. You could also divide it into 3 and do a 3-strand braid. I have actually done this in the past. You would just cut 2 slits and leave it all connected at the top, and then braid it up and roll the bun. But that's another video, so let's continue on with cutting these into 4. Now I'm going to clean up this mess, get these out of the way, and work with them one by one. If you feel that your dough is really soft and hard to handle, you could place the strips on a tray, cover them up, and refrigerate them for around 20 minutes to set them a little bit. But this was easy enough to work with at room temperature. So here's how you do a 4-strand braid. Take your strips and stretch them out gently so they're a bit longer. Now lay 2 strips side by side vertically, quite close to each other. Then lay the other 2 strips over the first 2 horizontally. Now cross over the 2 bottom right strips and the 2 top left strips. Now take the top right strip and cross it over the top left strip. Now repeat this step, going around in a circle with the remaining 3 strips. And once you're finished, do the same in the opposite direction. And if your braids were longer, you'll just keep going back and forth until you run out. In this case, we only have to do 2 rounds, because the strips are quite short. All we need to do now is tuck the loose ends underneath. Simply push them in with your fingers, propping the bun up. And that's how easy it is to make a 4-strand braid. And if none of what I said made sense, simply watch my hands and repeat. Now this little baby can go in the muffin tin, and we can continue on with the rest. And if you messed up that first one, hey, you got 5 more to practice on. Now I have greased the tin with butter, which is not totally necessary, as there will be plenty of butter coming out of these buns. But as I always say, better be safe than sorry, right? I actually need to practice some braids with more strands. When I see bakers braiding breads with 5 strands plus, it really messes with my mind. But I'm sure it's not that difficult. What about you? Have you made the bread with 5 strands or more? Let me know down in comments. Alright, let's continue on with these bad boys. Get them in the molds or in your muffin tin. Now we can cover them up and leave them for the final proof. This will heavily rely on the temperature of your kitchen, but an hour and a half to 2 hours should do the job. See, at the moment they are lower than the rim of the tin. Now I want them to poke out. It actually took me closer to 2 hours final proof. But make sure that during the final hour of fermentation you preheat your oven 170 degrees Celsius with a fan on. If your oven's quite strong, you might want to lower that to 160. And look at them, they're puffed up beautifully. They have risen higher than the rim of the tin, and they are super soft and airy. Now we can stick them in the oven. They'll take around 25 minutes or so. And you can turn the tray around halfway through the bake to give them a nice even crust. And just before your babkas come out of the oven, make the syrup. In a small pot, combine the sugar and the water, bring it over to the stove and bring it up to a boil. Now take your babkas out, and as soon as they come out of the oven, you want to brush them with the hot syrup. As you can see, they look a bit pale and boring at the moment. And applying the syrup makes a massive difference. It'll be like that first tan you get after winter. I mean, look at that shiny golden brown goodness. And a glaze like this can be used for many enriched doughs. So brush them generously all over, but before you take them out of the tins, leave them to set for around 10 minutes. This will ensure that they don't get distorted when you take them out. And with any luck, they should come out clean like this. So leave them to cool down a bit and tuck in. And there you have it. That's how you make mini chocolate babka buns. They're beautiful, they're easy to make, and they'll make a complete beginner look like a pro. And that's exactly why I made them. So what do you think of these buns? Let me know down in comments. And if you have any questions or suggestions, also let me know. And if you love bread and baking, you've come to the right place, so click that subscribe button. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.